So, Steph, welcome. Thanks for
Hey.
coming on. How about you tell us what you do and a bit about how you've been surviving these last few weeks? We'll start there.
Mm, that is a thing. Yeah, so I'll start with the first part. I have my master's in mental health counseling, so I'm actually a professionally mental health counselor. I'm also working to develop some resources that'll help people in various areas of life or with uh, organizations that need help for their staff and stuff like that. I work a lot with people who are dealing with things like anxiety, perfectionism, shame, and resilience to that kind of stuff. Um, And yeah, these last few weeks have been pretty interesting. I think it's been about 3 weeks now that I've been kind of distancing. I've moved clients online, so I'm still able to work with a few of them, whoever is wanting to kind of work through this time. But I think a lot of the things I'm doing um, are like a lot of self care kind of stuff. And I mean, exercise being a big part of that. Um, it is interesting because when we are having this kind of like fight flight kind of fear response and stuff, like our body's designed to move to react to that sort of stuff. And if we're just sitting there, it's kind of a recipe for all that energy to kind of pent up inside of us and kind of lead to more stress. So kind of trying to turn that into motivation to move even more often, so I have somewhere for that energy to go. But yeah, spending time connecting with people is another big one as well, as much as I can on FaceTime or here. I'm lucky enough to have family, so that's helpful.
Nice. I totally get where you're coming from with the pent up energy side of things, and even though in some cases I find myself more like I almost feel like I'm in paradise right now because like I don't have to go anywhere. I have very minimal
Yeah.
expectations, but at the same point, like I feel like I should be productive. I feel like I should be doing other things.
Uh, I think that's like the biggest struggle right now. And I've on my Instagram too, I've been posting about it because it's like now we have all this time on our hands. We're normally feeling so busy and so rushed. And it's like, hey, all those projects I always said I would do if I had time, now's my chance to do it. But like, yes, we have extra energy from being pent up and we have more time, but we're also under more stress. And so it's sometimes hard to take on all of those new big productive projects at the same time. So it's kind of like balancing between that.
Where do you go? Where do you put that energy? And um, yeah, to be completely like to be honest, this is how this podcast is coming to life. Is basically like, oh, the gym that I work at, we're no longer allowed to be open, and because I'm contract trainer, like I don't have the need to go to a space, and I'm seeing a few people online as well, but that's like 4 hours a week maybe,
Right? Less than
and
usual.
so it's like, okay, well, what do I want to do? What do I really enjoy about coaching and this industry? And so it was really the conversation and like I want to hear about people's stories and why they chose a specific behavior to go about self improvement or what they found to be challenging and sort of go from there. But
Yeah.
it's with the amount of time that we have and with the ability to put forth energy towards something. This was, I guess, one avenue, and it also helps twofold because I'm able to stay connected with people
Yeah.
more often as well, which is helping not only
Mhm.
my physical state but my emotional state as well.
Absolutely. People to still have that routine of talking about the things that you're used to talking about, the things that you're excited about, and to lean into something that you're actually like passionate about doing, just haven't had the chance. Like if they're those things that are life giving, I'm like, yeah, lean into that right now for sure.
Yeah, so that's been part of why I got you on, but also you've been like a part of my process of developing as a coach as well. But with that, I wanted to give you the floor and sort of tell us the story of your fitness journey and wherever it started, however you started to um, train, be active. What's your relationship with fitness?
So I had like quite a long relationship with fitness, but I'd say it evolved. Like it was changing over time. So when I was probably, I think I was like grade 6, when I remember like getting in my first kind of more like formal active thing. So I joined a like recreational gymnastics team when I was 6. I mean, I did a few of the like toddler ones when we were little, but that doesn't really even count. But I think, yeah, grade 6-ish, I got into like more of a team. And so several times a week we would get together. And, you know, it's interesting because when I was that age, I struggled a lot with anxiety. And I know I've talked to you a bit about like how I've used exercise with my mental health and just kind of developing that way. And when I was younger, I struggled a lot with anxiety. But you know, the one place that anxiety never touched me was when I was on the mat. Like that was the only place where I was free from any of those worries, from any of that stress. It was like somehow like the safe place. And I don't know if it was just the movement or the community, or the connection with other people or what, because team gymnastics and kind of performance recreation stuff is like building pyramids and tumbling, and it is support and yeah, exercise all at the same time. And so I found that that was a place for me of like huge emotional safety, physical safety. If you fell, someone was going to catch you. It was a place, yeah, just to get strong and to feel healthy. And so that's where I think things started for me. I built this very positive relationship with movement at a young age, and did that for a few years. And then I took time off of that and just kind of did your average kind of movement and stuff, more like hiking and walking, and maybe like a little bit, dabbled a little bit in PE with like the little weight training ones they would focus on for a unit or something, right? And then I did the same sort of gymnastics kind of stuff again for a couple years in college. And again, like it was such an outlet. People get so stressed in college, but this was a place I got to go for a couple hours, guilt-free, take a break from the schoolwork, move, connect with my friends. And yeah, it was just like, it was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, that was cut short because I did have a back handspring injury. So I dislocated my elbow, and because at that point, the sport that I had done up until then kind of ceased to become an option.
Yeah.
As I was in like recovery from that. And so I took a weightlifting class in university to try and see that. It didn't really stick. But I did little things here and there. I'd go running with a friend, or I'd go to the gym, or I'd go to the club. It was very haphazard. It was kind of like whatever was available or sounded interesting at the time. But that was also the time like a lot of people in our age group and my demographic, being a young female, are often talking about body image. And there's a lot of focus on that kind of stuff. And then in university, there's just a lot of stress in general. And so I found like it was interesting in my whole progression of this relationship with fitness and with health and yeah, all of that, and being my demographic was just like, it was a whole interesting mixture, because then I wasn't as active, like I wouldn't feel as fit. And then my relationship with food has always been pretty good, but it was less good than it could be, right? Because I maybe was not feeling as active, or I just, you know, there's just pressures at that age, especially, right? And for all ages, really. But, you know, it's just kind of got through that phase. I went into grad school. I'd kind of picked up jogging a bit through then. But when I was in grad school, I think it was my second year, my university started offering classes. And so I started attending the classes and just kind of getting into more of a routine and some kind of accountability to go to, to go to the gym and do something. And that's when I started switching from your typical, oh, I have to run, because that's how you like get in shape, and that's how you look good, and that's what you whatever. And I switched that mindset to trying out weightlifting, which is something I had not tried before. And I mean, cardio is still really good. I probably should do more of it. I don't do enough cardio at this point, probably. But the mindset changed when I started lifting, because when I started lifting, my motivation went from I need to run to look good to I want to be strong. I want to feel good. This is fun. It's a challenge. And I know a lot of people get that in whatever sport you pick in it, but it took me, at that moment, I felt like I found mine, right? And so when I clicked and I found the one that felt right to me, and I realized like how excited I got to do it, and how I loved the challenge of upping the weight, and I loved the how strong I felt, and when people would be surprised when I would be able to lift something at my size or whatever it was like that. And then I also realized that I had to eat more. I had to fuel myself more. I had to, and that is not a mindset you're taught when you're a young female, right? It's not something that's coming at you from media, from anything really. So when I got into this fitness world and I realized, oh hey, like I need to eat more. Well, that's fun. Like, I like that part of it. And then to be able to like use that and to see the improvement and to go, I'm eating more than I've ever eaten in my life. And I feel like I also look my best, and I was having fun with it. Um, and then it was a great spot for me when I was working on my graduate thesis, to be like, I didn't have classes and I couldn't quite work as a therapist yet, right? So I was kind of in this in between. And I, you can only spend so much time writing every day and researching. So it became that thing that I would do most days to just get out and to do something else. So that's probably when I spent the most time in the gym, is when I was at this probably one of the most intense times of my professional development. And also spending the most time at the gym. And I felt like it really helped kind of push me through that motivation. And that was around the time that you and I started working together, and you started to coach me in training. And then I think that's when I really started to take those kind of next steps in like, how do I properly build this? And then it became the ability to work towards like my personal goals in it, and to develop those kind of skills that that didn't feel like I was just going and spending time anymore, right? I wasn't just putting in the time. I was like working towards something that was making me excited, even if it was just a personal goal. Like it wasn't like I was competing or something, but it was a personal development thing. And I know I mentioned this to you around that time too, is that as I was kind of fluctuating to working more after that point, or there would be times when I wasn't able to get there for my usual like long workout at that time, I started to get into that mindset of kind of like thinking about like habit building, right? And habit maintenance. And I realized like, okay, let's say I don't have time for my full hour or hour and a half workout that I had been doing because my lifestyle was pretty chill, right? And I mean, not chill, I was writing a thesis, but I wasn't working 8 hours a day and then having to take care of a home and everything as well, right? So all things considered, my lifestyle was fairly flexible and allowed for it. But then it wasn't anymore. And I was like, okay, so how do I do this? And I found like even on those days, I'm like, hey, I don't have an hour or more to go to the gym, but I have 20 minutes. I'm just going to show up. I'm going to move a bit, and I'm going to feel good about it. And that's where I'm going to leave it. And it was that kind of step to not feel like I had to do all or nothing anymore, you know? I could just kind of embrace the habit of it, and yeah, just kind of use that. And I found that that allows me to maintain my fitness through changes in life. Because there are those times that, yeah, sure, I'd love to be in the gym an hour every day, but that's not something I can do at this point. I mean, now that we're on quarantine, I can. Right. I can work out at home for an hour. But there are times when I was commuting for work or spending a lot of time in the office, and I didn't have that sort of flexibility. But being able to say, hey, if I knock out a 15-minute hit today, at least I showed up, right?
Yep.
And it allows me to keep that habit in place. It's good for my mental health, because as I mentioned early on, we were talking about quarantine, like when we are reacting to stress, like your body wants to move. It's like, run away from this or do something to fix it, fight, flight. And the only way to convince your brain that you're fighting and flighting is to move it, right?
Yep.
And so I engage with it. I don't run from it. I don't try to push away the fear or the anxiety or the whatever. I just go, hey, I got this energy in my body. My body's telling me I need to run it off, or I need to lift something really heavy or whatever. And I find that it can be a hugely useful outlet, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like the long story of it.
No, I appreciate it. That's you touched on a lot of key points in a person's journey, especially from patterns that I've seen through coaching and stuff like that, of like the funny one that funny, but it's like the one that I feel more people should be going through and not panicking about is, especially for females, is like, oh, I'm lifting more and I need to eat more in order to maintain or improve my strength or my capacity or my ability to do the things that I want to do in training. Because there is such panic around like, oh, I need to eat more. Well, like, why? I'm trying to lose weight even. And you, like, that was the time when we were coaching, or I was working with you, and you sort of just like sailed over that. They didn't seem like a huge challenge, at least like from our interaction. Granted, that was like once a week or something at that point, but was there more that you did in the background in relation to that?
Like in relationship to food?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to say every person, but I'm going to speak as my demographics, so being a young female, goes through that kind of experience because of all the messages that society is pushing at you. And so I'd say in college, there was definitely more times when I would like be a little bit more like, oh, okay, like gauging this or gauging that. I mean, as I said, I've always had a fairly good relationship with food, so it's not been too bad, but there's always still those messages coming at you. And there's times when it was better than others, right? And so then when I went into that phase, so what I did is I talked to a dietitian. I'm like, I'm going to go right to the source. I'm going to get some like valid information here. Because I find so often this kind of stuff is so fueled by what we think we should do, right? And what we think we should do is often fueled by what we think people will think about us if we don't, or what's the thing that's going to happen. So let's follow that track through. If I eat more, then I worry that I'm going to not look good. If I don't look good, people might think I'm not beautiful. I'm not beautiful. Well, I'm supposed to be beautiful. I'm a woman. Like, and it follows that through. And you say like, okay, so what's that feeling? Kind of tracks down to feeling shame of just being real, right? And there are times when we fluctuate. We're human. That is normal. Stress happens, hormones happen, changes in diet and lifestyle happen, pregnancy happens, all these things happen to people, and it just changes it. And that's natural and normal. And the fact that we do take on so much fear of it in our fitness journeys can lead a lot of us to become fit because we're so ashamed of what will happen if we're not, right? And it's hard for a lot of people to process that. And so I think that's one thing that when we look at our kind of motivation for exercise, our motivation for eating the way we do, is it shame driven? Like, are we taking that on? Are we taking that message on to ourselves and saying, I deserve to feel bad about this? Like, so oftentimes we are. Versus if we can say, okay, hey, I can feel this feeling, and this feeling is shame. Like it is fear of what other people are going to think, or if I'm not good enough, or all of those things. And if we can kind of recognize it and name it, it gives us so much more resilience towards it. And so I'm kind of taking a rabbit trail to get to your answer.
Yep.
That's okay. But if we can do that, then it gives us the chance to say, okay, this is what I'm feeling, but I don't deserve to feel that way. It's not truly, it doesn't define who I am. It doesn't make me any less worthy of love and acceptance and connection with other people and with myself. We can kind of take that shame and say, hey, like talk to ourselves in a way that says, you know what, like whether or not I'm in my best shape right now doesn't affect my value. But holding on to the shame is impacting my relationship with food. It is impacting my relationship with my body. It's impacting my relationship with the gym because it's not fun to go when shame's yelling at you. It doesn't feel good, right? And so our ability to kind of recognize it kind of distances it from ourselves a little bit. And then like another really valuable step I find is also really talking to somebody about it who can understand and empathize with it. Sometimes that's a coach or trainer because they know you have to eat to be healthy, right? They can validate that, you're not defined by that. Your weight, you have a base weight, you have a body build, it's different than other people, and that's okay. It's normal, right? To talk to people who can validate the fact that, yeah, I'm feeling bad about this. You know what? Yeah, I've felt that too. To be able to validate that, right? And picking those people who are going to propagate the healthful message in it, right?
Hmm.
To talk to about that. Some of those can kind of start to mitigate some of that. And so I found I talked to someone about real information. I went to a dietitian and I said, tell me a little bit about how I should be eating. They were like, you know what, with your goals, snacking's even okay. And I was like, great. Like, I didn't think I could do that. Right. And other people, yeah, they're not going to snack. And other people's diet choices, they prefer to like separate your meals by a long amount. Right. There's different ways to approach it, but I got some coaching on what was right for me. Right.
Hmm.
Um, and another thing I did was then talk to you as a trainer and a coach to be able to say, here's my goals. I remember telling you that I don't want to bulk up, like I don't want to get big. And you assured me like, Steph, like that's very unlikely to happen unless you take some very intentional steps to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I think so many women fear that, but if they like touch the weights, that it's going to have the opposite effect than what they want. And not that I didn't change, like I definitely changed, and I could see changes in my shoulders and in my quads and like in larger muscle groups that did change a bit. But in general, like with the way my goals were and whatever, I still had to work towards what my goals were, right? But then it became like I felt like it was the best version of me. It wasn't some constructed um I'm going to pick this body build and I did everything I can to look like that body build. Like it shifted from that to what is my body's natural path if I take the best steps for my body.
Right.
And that's what it became. And my body informed me, oh, hey, your natural body build is this. And you in shape looks like this. Doesn't look like that. And I became okay with that because, yeah, I'm built in a little bit more of a strong yet petite way. And I'm never going to look like a skinny little model. And I'm very okay with that at this point in my life.
Hmm.
And being able to do that and just to lean in to let my body tell me what its best looked like.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of berating it for not looking like something that society told me was the usual or the should be, that kind of on a platform appearance. And so with food, like I am quite health conscious, but I enjoy that part of it, right? I don't do it in a constrictive way, where when I started, I definitely had more of an idea like, okay, well, what if I do like a cheat day? Let's try that. And so I would try that for a while. And I was like, okay, that's not bad. And I was snacking, so I didn't feel like I was ever restricting myself, but I was really more focused again at that point on like, let's try kind of loosely doing macros and see what that's like. Right.
Hmm.
So I did that for a bit and I got great results, but that has definitely not been something I've maintained as I've continued to develop that relationship with, again, like my health and my fitness and my body and all of that. I'd say as I continue to develop that, I've leaned much more towards the intuitive eating side of it, where I'm like, am I hungry? Okay, I'm hungry right now. I'm going to take some kind of like healthy snack. So it might be like a granola bar or a protein bar of some sort, or apples and peanut butter, some kind of little carb protein mix just to kind of give me that boost to get me to the next meal. It allows me to enter that next meal less hungry. So I feel less desperate to eat. So I just, again, eat until I'm full, right? And I can eat quite a lot. So I eat until I'm full, and then I tend to not really eat again until I'm hungry. And if I'm on a usual work schedule, it does tend to be 3 meals a day plus several snacks, right?
Right.
And so just being able to learn my metabolism and to learn when my body was telling me it needed fuel. Like what were my tells, right? Because so often we're like, no, we shouldn't snack, or no, we shouldn't this, or whatever. And to listen to my body's tells when it was telling me that it needed something and it needed fuel, and to realize too that the best way to maintain my muscle is to feed it, right? Even if I'm not working out as much or as long, but to still kind of like listen to my body's needs. And then I found when I was maintaining that general health lifestyle that fit with when I knew my body and I was able to kind of develop that healthy relationship with it, then I didn't stress much with the odd, oh, I'm going to splurge on this, or I'm going to get dessert, or I didn't have to feel bad about it.
Right. The consistency was there. You kind of had it dialed in. It sounded like it took a little bit of experimentation, but like, I think you hit the nail on the head with like, you were exploratory and you were like open for other options to be suitable. And the intuition thing, like that is such a skill that I notice most people either struggle with, or they're not quite dialed in, or they're still trying to
Yeah.
navigate that. And I mean, I think you sort of laid out a nice sort of step uh, or guide, if you will, of like how you navigated that, which is fantastic, because there is a lot of like mental mindset stuff that's there.
There it is.
And I feel like you did it in a very like intentional and intelligent way, which again is part of why I wanted to do this, is because I've had a little context into your story, and I've had my hand in it as well. But the other thing that you touched on was the habit maintenance of like
Mm-hmm.
just training in itself, and like obviously this bleeds into your nutrition as well, but the show up mentality, which is so hugely beneficial when
Oh,
regardless of your goal, right? Like if you just want to feel better, you still have to have consistency in whatever you're doing. But I personally learned that from a book called Never Let Go by
okay.
a coach named Dan John, who is one of my favorite strength coaches. And he's like, he must be late 60s, early 70s at this point, but phenomenal guy. But his book was basically an amalgamation of articles, and he had um, one basically blog articles because he's been blogging since forever. But
Yeah.
he wrote an article about the punch clock, or the time card, or the
Oh yeah, where you like put it in and it logs that you showed up.
basically he used that analogy of like there's times that you're just going to punch your clock with your workouts. They're not going to be PRs, they're not going to be record breaking, they're not going to be like incredible, they may not even feel fantastic. You might actually walk away from that workout feeling worse than when you showed up.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that you still showed up, and that you put in some work, and that's going to carry you much further than if you just don't show.
Absolutely. You made me think. There's a gymnast I follow on Instagram. She's an ex-gymnast. She lifts and does training now, but she was a gymnast back in the day. Hannah Bauer, and she talks about she gets those days when she's like, I don't have it in me. Like I don't have it in me today. And so those are the days that I do something different.
Mm-hmm.
I normally go and do like a full huge lifting workout. And on those days, I'm gonna do like random gymnastics warm up stuff where I'm gonna throw out some cartwheels, I'll do some push ups with jumps and claps, I'll do some like whatever stuff that brought her back to the things she really enjoyed. Not that she doesn't enjoy lifting, but there's some days you just don't have it in you the same way.
Very true. Very true.
Right? And so she's like, those are the days I do something fun, I do something different, I do something that feels like playing. Right?
Yep.
And I think I learned a lot from her in that. So I'm just like, okay, yeah. So I don't have to punch it out every day if I just can't. But I can do something.
Yeah. And you've also mentioned that there's a common theme, common thread that I've seen with a bit of your story, is that, and it fits the analogy I feel pretty well with, if you're familiar with like a soundboard or anything with dials, like multiple dials along the board, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to choose. And each dial has a specific purpose or function. So you could call it work, you could call it family, nutrition, fitness, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of playing this like weird game of like, okay, this one can be turned up to 7 today. This one's going to be a 1. This one's going to be a 4. And you're just sort of
Balancing
managing
it.
and balancing those dials. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
balancing is hard because they're
Yeah.
never going to be equal.
No, no.
But there is like there
Yeah.
is some level of not cost benefit, but whatever.
Prioritization and
Thank you.
yeah.
And so you have to manage, like there's going to be those days where it's like, yep, I'm feeling it, everything is pushed to 11, and you're going to crush it that day. Those are like few and far between, but then the rest of the time you're trying to manage everything else. And
Yeah.
I personally, over the last little bit, finding balance is kind of a misnomer. in that like it's very just in flux, and the idea of balance is sort of a mindset that people are like, you can achieve it, which sure, I mean, hey, if you believe it and you feel like you found balance, fantastic. I personally have never found it.
Life's not that stable, hey?
Yeah. And like the realization of that is like kind of calmed me down a little bit. Is like, okay, like I'm not trying to search for this nebulous thing or like trying to achieve this thing. I'm just gonna like turn this dial up or this knob forward, and I'm going to turn this one down because that's what the immediate thing in front of me dictates. It's what it needs.
Absolutely.
And that's been very, very interesting. And I sort of noticed some of the things that you're talking about as you're going through your story is like, yeah, at certain points, like I needed to eat more food. So my nutrition, like knowledge and practice and, or like questions, like that got dialed up. Whereas other things were dialed down. And it's, I find it's a very interesting mentality, not mentality, but like analogy of how you navigate that stuff. And I really, really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. I think it is. It very much is. And I liked how you just said too, I think if I should rephrase it similarly, but how you're saying like it's not about like balancing it and having it all figured out, right? Because I used to say this in counseling a lot too. I'm just like, we don't just like arrive and then you're there. Like there's no arriving at the place, whatever that nebulous place that's out there being like, what does it look like, right? And so oftentimes we feel that pressure that we have to have it all figured out. We have to have all these things, they all have to be lined up. And I think similarly, like my journey has very much been, how do I get to a place where I feel content with where I'm at and just thinking about adding the next good thing. And I heard a quote, and I wish I could source it, but I haven't been able to. A while back, I read it, and it was like, instead of worrying about having it all figured out or knowing like what the end is going to look like, maybe just think about adding the next good thing. Because if we take steps like that and add the next good thing and the next good thing, then our life becomes, intermixed with things that are out of our control, and we do make mistakes, but as best we can, we have the next good thing, and that all adds up over time to something great.
Yep.
Right? And there's things outside of our control that will happen, and when those happen, we just, again, do the next good thing that we can as best we can at that time. It doesn't have to be the perfect thing. It doesn't have to be the best thing, because we'll paralyze ourselves with lack of decision making. And that happens in fitness too, right?
Oh yeah.
Like you can paralyze yourself with lack of knowing how to do it. You can paralyze yourself with fear of showing up to the gym not looking like the people who've been there for 10 years. You can paralyze ourselves with fear of food. We can paralyze ourselves with the wrong information, right? But if we can just take that first step of showing up and just adding a good thing. And for someone who's just starting, that might be, I'm going to start walking around the block every night, right? That's the next good thing. And then when that feels like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm going to like also add a little bit of push-ups at the beginning of it. Just the next good thing, right? And just add little bits as we can. I have to laugh. I went to this was so strangely inspirational. I went to Frozen 2 with your wife, actually. And we went to Frozen 2, and there's a song in there about doing the next best thing and not knowing what to do, not knowing how to handle it. And things seemed too out of control and unmanageable. But I'm just going to do the next best thing. And I was like, that's like actually incredibly inspirational thought. All in this cartoon movie. That I found to be really valuable and applicable to so many areas of life. So, there's a little Disney plug for you.
I love that stuff. And I do that. I find myself noticing those things as well of like, I think it was actually Mary Poppins Returns, the second one, where a lot of like her quotes or like the little one-liners that she would say or life lessons in a nutshell. Right. I was like, oh my gosh, like you could take that and like run with it.
Yeah, legit though. It's so true. I love Disney, man.
Well, it's yeah, I mean like you say, and I've heard it said in many, many different ways, but like, yeah, when you fall off the bandwagon, what's the next action that you need to take? And that's, I actually have a little bubble poster thing here that you can write on, and it says action creates motivation.
Mm.
And in this time as well, I've seen a few posts that are like action, I don't know, they're very action based, meaning like they take away the anxiety of the unknown or the unpredictable. And I think on the flip side of that is that people get too scared to put forth action in the wrong way,
Sure.
and then uh then they get even further lost or paralyzed, like you mentioned as well, and then they're just sort of sitting in the same place that they were. But what's the next baby step that you could make to learn and then adapt as you go?
It is so true. And something on that note, like I know I mentioned like how shame oftentimes is something that gets us doing things that for the wrong reasons. The shame can also stop us from doing things for the wrong reasons, right?
Mhm.
If we're feeling bad about ourselves. And shame is even deeper than that. Like it's a true belief in our value not being what it should be or could be. And when we're experiencing that because we, like you said, fell off the wagon in one area of life or another, um, if we don't identify and respond to that shame, like I said, in a way that tells the shame like, hey, you don't own me and that's not true, and talk to someone who is supportive about it and just build that resilience towards it, then we tend to, if we don't do that, we tend to let it define us.
Right.
We stick a label on ourselves. I'm a failure. I'm a screw up. I'm whatever. We put those things on ourselves. We label ourselves the mistake, right? And we're human. We're going to make mistakes. Like it's part of life. It's going to happen. Everyone is going to, right? So if we let shame define us in that moment, it feels like we lose the capacity to change because it's suddenly this label smacked onto us. And if that's who we are, then where's the room for growth?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so being able to shift from shame into guilt, and again, guilt can carry a lot of heavy connotation as well, but let's look at it in a way that's constructive. If guilt is something that's like, hey, I made a mistake, I want to make it right, I want to take the next good step, I'm just going to do my best in this place. And guilt leaves it there. That's it. It's much less heavy than the shame that we usually mix with it, which says, oh my goodness, how could I? I'm such an awful person. I'm like, whatever. And those are the messages. As soon as we feel those messages, we know that's shame. And we need to recognize it, we need to call it out and be able to say, like, hey, no, that does not define me. That does not affect my value. I don't have to do this like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they were able to develop that habit right now doesn't mean that I had to develop it the first time. You know what? I'm going to get up. I'm going to try again. I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to find a way that works for me. I'm going to get more support. I'm going to, whatever it is, talking to it, shoving it off to the side, right? Maybe it's talking to somebody about it, because that's another thing. Shame doesn't really thrive when it's talked about and known about. It has to be secret. So talking to a coach, talking to a friend, a loved one who gets it, a therapist, whoever that is, right? To be able to kind of, again, take that power away from that, and to say, hey, like, yeah, if I made a mistake in my life, how can I do it better? Or was it simply human error and I was doing my best,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes we are doing our best and it doesn't look like somebody else's best.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we expect our best to look different. Like in this time of quarantine is a pretty good example of that, because like you said, there are going to be like times when we're like, hey, I can do this new thing, right? But there's going to be other times where like, I really don't have the energy for that other new thing right now. I'm dealing with too much. And there's so much pressure out there right now, I feel, to accomplish. So right now is the time to, people are saying, learn a new language. Now is the time to, I don't know, what are the other things I've heard? Like suddenly master all of your personal habits. Now is the time to recondo your house. Now is the time to like all of these things. And while somebody might need those things to cope with what's happening right now, other people's best is going to look like getting through the day.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to look like getting through the day. It's going to look like I got up, I made my bed, I ate 2 to 3 meals, I fed the kids.
Yep.
Maybe I washed the dishes. And it's going to look like getting through the day. But you know what? At this time, with all that's happening right now, that's some people, that is what the best is for a lot of us. There's many ideas I had about what I was going to accomplish during this time that I have not been able to do, because there's a couple of days where I'm like worried about people I do know who are on the front lines. There are times when I am carrying a bit more stress personally. I'm like, oh, now I have to go to town and run errands. What am I going to do? So like, it is taking away from my productivity, and it's something I've been wrestling with too. And so I feel like it's a kind of like a current example of like, there are times when, yes, we make a mistake, but there's also times when we're doing our best and it just doesn't look like other people's bests.
Yeah. And you
But it
touch
is
on,
our best.
yeah.
And we
And
shouldn't feel shame about that.
because you're comparing to somebody else that you don't
Mhm.
actually know what's going on in their personal life, their real life. Like, yeah, that's a
Exactly.
whole different can of worms. But yeah, that's huge. And I I like your point on like your day is going to look differently. Like, did you wake up at a given time? Like, did you wake up in the AM like, versus the PM,
Yeah,
or whatever? Like,
exactly.
it's going to look differently for each person, right?
Were you off of Instagram before 1 p.m.? Like,
And I mean, like, I have a friend who his business almost went to zero with the kickoff of this craziness, and he's like, "Yep, these are the steps that I'm navigating this." And it was basically like trying to maintain a routine of what work was, so that it wasn't a hard comeback when
yeah.
this thing is done and over with. And it's like, yeah, I'm just like waking up, maintaining a routine, like still got to feed the kids, still got to like take care of that, but like
Yeah.
still working, right, for a given period of time during the day, so that
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
comes go time again, like you're not just like that polar bear walking with its face on the ice. I don't know, it's like the Monday meme.
Yeah, exactly. I listened to a talk by a psychiatrist, Bessel van der Kolk, and he's a trauma specialist. And that's one of the things he was talking about is like using this, like adding more structure to your unstructured time can
Hmm.
be good. You might not, yeah, you might not be working your 8 hours if you know, given circumstances, that might not be something you're capable of right now. But doing something in that day, having some kind of structure to it, so you know what to expect, creating predictability in an unpredictable time.
Yeah.
And he's also the one who I mentioned earlier how when we do have a lot of stress and stuff going, being able to move our bodies is a hugely important response to it. Because he said right now people are having a lot of fight flight reactions.
Hmm.
And he said being able to channel that energy, you can't really flight right now. There's nowhere to go. You can't really leave your house. You're going to have a lot more fight in you than you normally do. Right? So do something with it, use it, do a project, do an exercise program, do something for that nervous system energy to go. And I think exercise is a hugely impactful way, because beyond even that, it has positive impacts on your brain's ability to grow,
Hmm.
for your brain's ability to create the new neural pathways, the new neurons, things that we you know, years ago didn't believe was even possible. Exercise is one of the biggest ways to promote that. It's like creates the fertilizer that literally is fertilizing your brain. um, Another book I've mentioned to you before is Spark by Dr. John Ratey.
Yes.
And he talks a lot about that. Like it's literally like one of the single most beneficial things you can do for brain development, and how he uses it for basically a prescription for people who are struggling with mental health.
Yeah, it creates that outlet, like you say, and it just burns off that nervous energy.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Because when your body's telling you to run, run.
yeah, exactly. And now for all the hikers too, they're closing like the parks and as
Yeah.
well. So it's like, there is nowhere to go.
No. And so home workouts are where it's at, man.
Yeah, and
I have built a whole lifestyle around them.
I'm in the industry and I don't enjoy them. And uh, yeah, that's a different story for another time. But um, maybe some quicker, punchier questions that I've got
Mhm.
for you. Um, what currently at this point, because it's never always like the end of the story, but at this point, up to this point, what is your most favorite, or like the accomplishment that like brought you the most joy or happiness or whatever, like you just
Yeah.
like crushed it? What was that?
I think it was like when I was lifting my heaviest. Oh no, there's two. There's two. So when I was lifting my heaviest, this was maybe like a year and a bit ago, when I had a lot more time, and I was able to deadlift 15 pounds more than my body weight, and not for a not for a max rep. Like it wasn't even that. Like it was a full set at that, like a full set of reps at that weight. And so that was a big accomplishment for me. I was like, yeah, I can lift much more than I weigh. And then my other big one was getting pull-ups.
Oh, yes.
That was one that I worked hard towards, and it was something that I was like, not many women do this unless they're like really into it. And so it was something I just like looked up, like what are the exercises. It was before I started working with you that I learned those. And then you tried to help me increase my reps, and they're still, I have to admit I've been a little lazier on increasing reps than I should be. But yeah, getting those, that was a huge accomplishment for me. And I'm actually, now that my sister is home from university because of the quarantine, and I also decided to come back to home during this kind of shutdown time. She's a cardio buff. Like she loves biking and running, and she's like, I want to get a pull-up, and so she's like, can you teach me to do it? So I'm back at the basics of doing those again. So
Nice.
those are probably my favorites.
I love it. What are you currently working on? What is your current goal that you're striving towards?
So my current goal that I'm striving towards, I've been a little set back because was in a moderate car accident about a year and a bit ago. So I'm not really supposed to lift anything as heavy as I wish I was. So I think my current goal would be to get back to lifting those weights that I was doing. I would love to do that, but I'd say currently, like at this moment in this like couple of months where we're having downtime, my goal is to move every day, like to move every day and to do weights, because I have some home stuff. I have some like kettlebells and resistance bands and that kind of stuff, to do those as many days as I can. And the days when I can't, still to move, whether it's going for a hike, whether that's going for even just a walk, something. So I'd say like in this time, in this month or two where we're home and not doing anything, I'd say it's movement every day, weights as much as I can. Long-term goal is to get my rehabilitation back to where I can go back to lifting 15 pounds over my body weight. But that's going to be a bit of a longer term thing.
For sure. Nice. I like that. You mentioned a bit about play. I did a video with our athletic therapist at the gym talking about play, and that's another can of worms that we won't necessarily jump into, but yeah, just the movement every day, and like categorizing movement versus like exercise, and how those two are different. And like I think you also nailed it with like movement can be anything from walking, hiking, going for a bike ride, or like just doing some mobility work, or what can oftentimes be categorized as like active recovery.
Yeah.
Where you're still moving through ranges of motion to help promote blood flow, recovery, the whole bit. But movement every day, it's the thought that went through my head was like, are you taking your meds? It's like movement every day. Just fits perfectly.
Yeah, it does for so many things, right? There's those little steps.
Yeah. My professor used that analogy. He's like, if I could package exercise into a pill, and that exercise was 30 minutes a day, I would get rid of 98% of your chronic diseases.
There's so many things that exercise interacts with, right? Yeah. We need to think about like health and wellness much more holistically than we have in the past. And as a counselor, like I see so much of that where like I wish I could work with a trainer in partnership, because like someone who understands like the mental health aspect of it, where their goals are, again, probably if they're struggling, are probably not going to be at like at a big weightlifting thing, but somebody who's there to encourage them through that. Hey, let's like go through John Ratty's book, and he talks about the amounts of dosage, like really narrowing it down to dosage, like your professor was saying, like, is it half an hour, is it whatever? And he has one formula. He talks about body weight and like is it body weight and age? There's a couple of numbers he mixes together, and he like has basically a prescription for cardio for
Right.
certain disorders and whatever.
Yep.
And I'm like, if we could work with someone who has that kind of a mindset and who can encourage people in that way, yeah, holistic health is definitely, I think, a direction that we need to keep going.
Yeah, it's huge, and it's interesting to see because I find like in your space, you're the young version of me in my space. I feel like when I work with people who are in their 50s and 60s, like they have no idea about this stuff, and I feel rather fortunate that like I've
Mhm.
pursued this and I can then share this with other people who are
Mhm.
older than I am. But like the fact that like it's all connected versus just putting everything into a silo and that's it.
Yeah.
um yeah, it just carries over in your fitness, in your nutrition, your lifestyle, your
Mhm.
spiritual, your existential, like the things that I consider to be lifestyle. It spreads into every component of that, and that's part of the message that I'm putting out there is to work on it, or not work on it, but like just to be aware of it first of all, so then you can increase your knowledge, or at least like not
Mhm.
let knowledge be the linchpin that's holding you back,
Yeah.
and
I
then you
mean,
can put action
to use
towards
like a
it.
really therapist-y word, I like to like, let's like lean into it. Let's just lean into it. When we come up against like struggles in life, we can like lean away. And usually when we lean away and push and shut down, we're gonna have symptoms creep up, whatever area of life that is, you know? But if we can kind of like lean into these struggles a little bit and go like, yeah, this is uncomfortable. But like lean into it a little bit. Can I take a little step? Can I get a little bit of help? Can I get a bit of support? Like, starting somewhere.
Yep. I have a question for you. Have you
Mm.
heard of this book? It's called The Five Tools,
No, I don't think so.
not of baseball.
Yeah, I don't know much about that.
um let's go book, or maybe it's The Tools, that's what it is. Who wrote it is the question.
Hmm.
No, I don't want the blog, I want the book. Here we go. By Phil Stutz and
No, I've
Barry
heard of them.
Michaels. Have you
Okay.
heard of them?
Mm-mm.
Um, this book was very, very interesting to me, at least, because obviously the premise is that there's five tools to help you find courage, creativity, and willpower, and inspire you to live life in a forward motion. And it was a psychotherapist, I believe
Okay.
was the title, that was like personally fed up with just like being told that he needed to go deeper into and deeper and deeper and deeper into people's like childhood, and like that was the reason why their symptoms were showing up, or that their life was a mess or whatever. And so he's like, no, there's got to be more. And so he sort of goes through this story, and one of the tools you actually just mentioned was to go into the resistance, to push into it. And that
Mhm.
was again not intuitive for many people. It's not like the thing that you want to do. You do want to be more reserved in those cases,
Yeah.
but if you're able to then lean into it.
Sorry, my dog.
Oh, it's all good. um,
Yeah.
if you're able to then lean into it, then like growth happens there, and growth happens in the struggle, which again is like a very mindset-y thing to say,
It
but so
is.
impactful, right?
I find too that's interesting in that way is like I'm gonna put it in a therapy perspective again. Like I work with a lot of people who are very hesitant to talk about how they're feeling, how they're doing, to talk to someone. It's scary and it's overwhelming. And I get that. And sometimes we just spend time validating that and just leaning into that. Yeah, it's hard.
Hmm.
Let's just spend some time leaning into how it feels hard and what it feels like for that to be hard and what it's like to have that wall. And so many times when we just even just lean into the wall a little bit, we don't have to push past it like right away. We're not trying to break it down. That's not safe. That doesn't feel safe, right? We're going
Hmm.
to create safety. And it's the same when we're taking steps in lifestyle, right? We want to create safety. We want to create steps. And so, like, when we kind of can lean into, like, when I think about going to the gym, I'm feeling some kind of way. Like, it's scary to me. There's something there that makes me resistant.
Yeah.
We don't have to, like, just push past that feeling and show up at the gym right immediately. Let's just spend some time in that feeling instead of pushing it away, because
Hmm.
it might give us a bit more insight into what's going on, right? Is it I'm hesitant to go because I'm worried people will think about me when I show up there? Is it I'm hesitant to go because of this or that? Sometimes just spending some time in the in between is a step in and of itself,
Yeah, totally.
right?
I've found in the last year or so, a lot of these things, and without context, it doesn't make any sense, but like just the ability to create space
Mm-hmm.
is so beneficial and impactful for some people. And to put context around it, the ways that I think about it is like, you actually said this earlier, was like, am I hungry? You felt a craving. You know that there's an easy way to fix that craving or feeling, right? But you stopped and you said, you asked yourself the question, you created that space in between the subconscious brain and the thinky conscious brain, um, and said, well, yeah, okay, I'll have a snack. I don't need a full meal right now. And like, that was the process that you took, which most of the time is just impulse control in that context.
Yeah. We
But the
so often are
same,
often like feeling react. And I often try to replace react with respond,
mm,
because react feels like an impulse, like you said,
yeah,
right? Respond says, I felt it. I leaned into a bit, and then I did my best of moving forward.
right.
And we are going to have times when we still react because, again, we're human.
Yeah.
And then we just deal with how that turned out, take the next step, and, grow and try to do differently the next time, right? It's like such a process. And spending some time in that in between, like you said, in that kind of a moment, super healthy.
Yeah.
Not
It's
overthinking
funny.
it, just kind of being.
Yeah. It's funny how, just being myself and like wanting to keep this conversation going. It's just,
Mhm.
there's so much meat that like, so many things are just like, yep, I've had that thought or that hunch, and it's just like validation, validation, validation. And it's just from like experience, intuition, obviously reading and my own education and stuff like that. But um I find it's like there should be a psychology degree attached to what I do, but
Legit though.
um
Mhm.
but it's so true. Like, and there's been difficult times where it's like you have to ask the question of like, hey client, like, do you need to talk to somebody that specializes in mental health, because it seems like the world is crumbling around you and you don't have the skills to cope. And obviously you can't just say that to their face. You have to like have that
Yeah, a
conversation.
way to have it.
There's a good and a bad way to have it, but
Yeah.
um I feel like, and I'm biased again because I took a minor in psychology, or I was like
Right.
one C minus away from a a minor in psychology.
Oh.
My first 2 years of college were terrible.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, like I've had an interest in it, and so I've read a lot of like psychology books and stuff like that. So that's why it's been so fun to talk and like work with you, because it's just like
Mhm.
you get it.
Right? And I think similarly, vice versa, because I work in a field that can be very single minded in itself. And I've found those outlets of ways to integrate holistic health into it, and exercise being a huge one. And so when I come to training, it's not just training. It's like, what else is going on in it and around it? And what kind of stuff are we learning right now about how these two things intersect? And I think that has been a really cool thing, because it's shown me even more about that. Because I think when you interact with someone's body and their health, like it's what holds them. It's their little, like, yes, they have all this mental aspect of themselves, and the psychological aspect and the emotional aspect, but it's all housed in their body, right? And I think that when you interact with someone's body like that and helping them in that way, it reaches them at another level too, right? And I know massage therapists have told me the same thing.
Yep.
And I think, like, yeah, when you're ministering to someone physically and health wise, you're touching them on another level of support as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Steph.
Absolutely.
Share a little bit about where people can go to find you and what you're doing in the background.
Yeah, so I run a private practice counseling in Langley and Port Moody in British Columbia. So it's called Live Authentically Counseling. And so you can find me on Instagram at Live Authentically Counseling. On there also has a link to my website. And so I don't know if you can post that with this anywhere. People can just
Absolutely.
get it there and make it easier for them. But yeah,
I'll link it up. No worries. Anything else that you feel like we did not cover that you just want to parting shots, as it were?
parting shots. No, I think like we kind of covered most of it. I think just that true belief that exercise is good for your brain, good for your mental health, and kind of developing that healthy relationship overall. I mentioned a few books I'd recommend. John Ratty's Spark being a really good one. A lot of the shame work that I do comes out of Brene Brown's research, and so anything written by her, I always recommend people can use some of that kind of stuff that kind of helps some of these barriers as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and I recommend some of those on my Instagram as well and on my website. So if people want to go there, I can direct them to even a few more of those.
Perfect. Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate it, and it's been fun to reconnect
Yeah.
amidst the chaos of
Mm-hmm.
isolation. And yeah, appreciate you for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for asking. Good to see ya.